Maya, a simple waitress in her mid-20s, carried a tray of coffee cups toward a corner table when her eyes caught sight of a man outside the glass door. He was thin, wrapped in a faded jacket far too heavy for the season, his beard streaked with gray, his hands trembling as he held a cardboard sign that read, "Hungry. Please help." The cafe was busy. Laughter, clinking dishes, and the aroma of fresh bread filled the room. But Maya's attention stuck on him like a hook at her chest. Most people hurried by. A few frowned at the sight. The manager muttered something about loiterers. But Maya, with a heart that couldn't walk past suffering, stepped outside. She carried a plate with a sandwich, turkey, cheese, crisp lettuce, and a glass of water. "Here," she said softly, her voice more sunlight than sound. The man's eyes lifted, watery blue under the dirt and weariness. He hesitated, as if pride wanted to push the gift away. But hunger won. He whispered, "Thank you," in a voice so raspy it broke something inside her. She smiled, shrugged, and returned to work as if nothing had happened. To Maya, it was just a sandwich, a small kindness anyone should offer. She didn't know that her act had already set something larger into motion, because that man, unknown to her, was not just a wanderer. Once he had been someone else. His name was Hank Donovan, a former Marine who had served decades ago, quietly decorated for courage, then lost to the margins of society after life dealt blows no training could prepare him for. To Maya, he was just a hungry man. But to hundreds of Marines scattered across the country, he was family. That night, as the cafe lights dimmed and Maya walked home under a sky streaked with pink and gold, a passerby who had filmed her gesture posted the clip online. Waitress feeds homeless veteran with her own tip money. It spread quietly at first, like a candle lit in the dark. But candles have a way of sparking others. By morning, the world had shifted, and Maya, just a girl who handed out coffee with a smile, was about to learn that even the smallest kindness can echo like thunder. The next day, as the sun climbed high, 300 Marines stood shoulder to shoulder outside the cafe, boots aligned, uniforms pressed. They weren't there for coffee. They were there for her. The clip of Maya's kindness didn't take long to travel. By midnight, it was circling through Marine veteran groups, private chats, and old comrades' message boards. Someone recognized Hank Donovan. "That's Gunny Donovan," one man typed. "I served under him in Fallujah. He saved our squad." Another voice chimed in. "He trained me back in '99. The man's a legend." Soon, phones buzzed across states. Veterans called one another, and stories spilled like fire across dry grass. Tales of Donovan shielding his men from enemy fire, carrying wounded Marines on his back, staying behind so others could make it out alive. Men who hadn't spoken in years found themselves remembering the same man, the same unbreakable Marine who had somehow ended up on a sidewalk with a cardboard sign. And at the center of it all was the quiet waitress who had treated him like a human being when the world looked away. Maya, of course, knew none of this. Her night was ordinary. She folded her apron, slipped on her denim jacket, and walked home along streets painted in the last glow of sunset. She thought briefly of the homeless man, hoped he had found shelter, and then let the thought go. To her, kindness wasn't a performance, it was breathing. But the world outside her small apartment was stirring. A retired colonel in Virginia saw the video and made a call. "We owe it to Donovan," he said simply. A sergeant in California booked a flight. A captain in Texas rallied 20 men who had once served together. By dawn, plans were set. Marines, active and retired, young and gray-haired, began making their way to a little cafe on Main Street, a place they'd never heard of until now. They came not for coffee, but to honor the girl who had shown respect to one of their own. The morning sun rose bright and sharp, throwing long shadows over the town. Maya walked to work humming softly, unaware that the air already carried a strange electricity, as if the day itself was holding its breath. Inside the cafe, she tied her apron and wiped down tables. Customers trickled in, the usual office workers, students, and regulars who greeted her with nods. For the first hour, nothing seemed unusual, but then the rumble began. At first, it was just the sound of boots. A dozen, then more. Maya glanced up, confused, as men and women in uniform filled the sidewalk, standing at attention, their lines stretching farther than she could see. Cars slowed. People stopped to stare. And still, more Marines arrived, the thud of their steps rhythmic, like a heartbeat that shook the ground. By the time Maya set down her tray, 300 Marines stood outside the cafe in perfect formation, their eyes fixed on her through the glass. She froze, tray trembling in her hands. The room went silent. No one knew what to say. And then, as one, the Marines saluted. Maya's breath caught in her throat. She wasn't ready. She had only given a man a sandwich. But somehow, that simple act had turned into something so much bigger than she could have imagined. For a long heartbeat, Maya stood frozen. The sunlight spilling through the cafe windows felt heavier, brighter, as if the whole world were watching her. Outside, 300 Marines stood in perfect silence, their uniforms sharp, their faces solemn. Every customer inside the cafe had gone quiet too. Phones half raised, coffee cups forgotten. The tray in Maya's hand rattled until she set it down. Her knees felt weak, her breath shallow. She had never seen anything like this. She was just a waitress in a small-town cafe. Why would hundreds of Marines be here, standing for her? Her manager whispered, "Go outside." His voice cracked in awe, not command. Maya's hand shook as she untied her apron. She pushed through the glass door, and the warm sun wrapped around her like a spotlight. The murmur of the gathered townspeople hushed to nothing. The front line of Marines stepped forward. At their center stood a tall man with close-cropped silver hair and shoulders still broad from years of service. His chest bore medals that glinted in the sun. He carried himself with the kind of weight only a commander could bear. He saluted her again, crisp and flawless. Then he lowered his hand and spoke, his voice carrying like thunder rolling across the street. "Miss, yesterday you fed one of ours." He paused, his jaw tight with emotion. "You didn't know who he was. You only saw a man in need. But that man is Gunnery Sergeant Hank Donovan." Gasps rose from the crowd. Maya's lips parted, her heart stumbling at the name. The homeless man? The one with trembling hands and weary eyes? The colonel continued, his gaze steady on hers. Gunnery Sergeant Donovan saved lives, many of them. Some of the Marines standing here today owe their very breath to him. But life turned against him, and he fell through the cracks. And while the world walked past him, you stopped. You showed him dignity. Maya swallowed hard, her throat burning. She wanted to say something, anything, but words scattered like leaves in the wind. The colonel turned his head. "Company, present arms." In one motion, 300 Marines raised their hands in salute. The sound of it, the snap of wrists, the unison of discipline, ripped through the air like a gunshot. Maya felt tears sting her eyes, her chest trembling under the weight of the moment. The colonel stepped closer. His voice dropped, soft and now, meant for her. "The world calls heroes men like Donovan. But today we call you one too." Her vision blurred. She shook her head, barely whispering, "I just gave him a sandwich." The colonel's lips pressed into a thin smile. "And sometimes that's what saves us all." The Marines lowered their arms. The silence that followed was thick, reverent. Maya stood in the sunlight, every part of her trembling. For the first time, she realized that kindness, her ordinary, everyday kindness, was not small. It was a force, and that force had summoned 300 Marines to her doorstep. The crowd began to thin, though many lingered, whispering about what they had witnessed. Maya, still trembling, felt a hand touch her shoulder. She turned. There he was, Hank Donovan, the same man she had given the sandwich to just the day before. His hair was still wild, his jacket still frayed, but his posture was straighter now, as if the presence of his brothers and sisters in uniform had lifted something heavy off his back. His watery blue eyes met hers with a mix of gratitude and shame. "Can we sit?" he asked quietly. Maya nodded and guided him to a table just outside the cafe, where the sunlight warmed the wooden surface. The Marines stood respectfully back, forming a loose perimeter, watching with the kind of protective stillness only soldiers can hold. For a long moment, Donovan said nothing. His hands fidgeted with the rim of the paper cup she had brought him. Finally, he exhaled, his voice carrying the gravel of years. I was a Marine for 25 years. Gunnery sergeant. Did my tours. Trained my men, buried too many of them. His gaze drifted to the distance, to some battlefield no one else could see. When I came home for good, I thought I'd be fine. Strong. Turns out, the fight doesn't end when the shooting stops. Maya listened, her chest heavy. My wife, she left. Couldn't handle the nightmares, the mood swings. I don't blame her. My son stopped speaking to me. Then one injury turned into painkillers, and painkillers turned into a habit I couldn't kick. Before I knew it, I lost my house, my family, my place in the world. In the Corps, he gave a bitter laugh. The Corps moved on. They always do. He looked at her then, eyes raw. But yesterday, you looked at me like I wasn't trash. Like I was still human. That hasn't happened in a long time. Maya swallowed, tears slipping unbidden down her cheeks. It was just a sandwich, she whispered. Donovan shook his head firmly. No, it was a reminder that I matter. That I'm still worth something. You don't understand. Miss men like me. We disappear. But your kindness, his voice cracked. It brought me back. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant shuffle of boots. Maya wanted to reach across the table, to take his hand, but she didn't want to break the fragile dignity he was piecing back together. Finally, Donovan straightened. His spine carried the ghost of his old strength. He glanced at the Marines standing guard. I never thought I'd see them again. Never thought they'd come for me. But they did, because you reminded them of me. You reminded me of me. Maya's breath caught. She had thought she was the one giving him something small. But in truth, Hank Donovan had given her something far greater. The proof that kindness could resurrect a soul. Around them, the sun blazed brighter, as though the day itself wanted to honor the moment. People on the sidewalks wiped their eyes. Customers inside pressed their palms to the glass. And Maya realized something else. Her life, once ordinary and unnoticed, had crossed an invisible line. There would be no going back to just serving coffee. Not after this. The next morning, Maya thought life might return to normal. She walked to the cafe with her apron folded under her arm, telling herself that maybe the Marines had gone back to their bases, that maybe yesterday had been a strange dream. But as she turned the corner onto Main Street, her heart sank. Reporters, cameras, a crowd 3 times larger than before, buzzing with energy. The cafe windows gleamed under the morning sun, but now microphones were pressed against the glass, news vans lined the block, and strangers held signs that read, "Kindness matters and honor our heroes." Her manager met her at the door, wide-eyed. "Maya, you're on the front page. Everywhere." She froze. "What do you mean?" He shoved a newspaper into her hands. Her own face stared back at her in grainy print, caught mid-smile, holding out the sandwich. Beside her image, bold letters screamed, "Waitress sparks movement by feeding forgotten Marine." Maya's hands trembled. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't wanted fame. But the world seemed to have chosen her. Inside, the cafe was already overflowing. Customers came not just for coffee, but to see her. Some pressed letters into her hands. Thank you notes, stories of their own lost relatives, donations to help veterans like Donovan. One elderly woman wept openly, clutching Maya's hand. "My brother died in Vietnam. Thank you for remembering them." Maya could hardly breathe. She wasn't a politician, wasn't a leader, wasn't anyone special. She was just a girl who worked double shifts and barely paid rent. Yet suddenly, people looked at her as though she were carrying something bigger than herself. In the corner, Donovan sat straighter than he had in years. The Marines hadn't abandoned him after that first day. They rotated in and out, making sure he had food, shelter, dignity. For the first time in decades, he felt surrounded again, part of a brotherhood that had never truly let go. The cafe bell jingled as another wave of people entered. A young college student approached Maya, her voice trembling. "You've shown us that kindness isn't weakness. It's power. It changes things." She placed a single daisy on the counter. "Don't forget that." By evening, national news anchors were telling the story. Headlines swept across the internet. Social media flooded with clips of the Marines saluting her. Hashtags trended. Strangers from around the world sent messages. I gave food to someone today because of you. Your story reminded me to call my father a veteran. We need more Mayas. Maya sat at her small kitchen table that night, the glow of her phone lighting her weary face. Thousands of messages, too many to read. She dropped the phone onto the table and buried her face in her hands. This was never supposed to be about me, she whispered to the silence. But the silence didn't answer, because somewhere in the distance, the echo of boots on pavement reminded her. Once an act of kindness is set loose in the world, it cannot be called back. At first, Maya thought she could handle it. She told herself the cameras would fade, the headlines would shift, and life would go back to normal. But the days that followed proved her wrong. The cafe that once held quiet conversations and the smell of cinnamon rolls was now packed every hour. Customers didn't just want coffee, they wanted her. They asked for pictures, for autographs, for stories. They pressed folded bills into her hands, whispering, "Use this for more sandwiches." Her coworkers were thrilled at the extra business, but Maya felt herself shrinking under the attention. She couldn't step outside without microphones catching her words. Every smile felt like a performance. Every move was recorded, dissected, debated online. And with the praise came something else, criticism. One morning, while scrolling through her phone, she saw a headline that made her stomach clench. Was the waitress's kindness a publicity stunt? Another article accused her of seeking fame. Comment sections overflowed with strangers who had never met her, arguing about whether she was genuine or manipulative. Maya pushed the phone away, but the words stuck like thorns. She hadn't asked for any of this. All she had done was give a man a sandwich. She buried herself in work, but even that wasn't safe. One afternoon, as she poured coffee for a group of tourists, a man in a suit stepped up to her table uninvited. His smile was sharp, polished. "Miss," he said smoothly, sliding a business card across the counter, "we'd like to represent you. Speaking tours, media appearances, branding deals. You could raise awareness and make money. This could change your life." Maya blinked at the card, at the gleaming logo of a PR agency. Her heart tightened. "I'm not interested," she said quickly, pushing it back. The man chuckled. "Think about it. The world already sees you as a hero. You should use it. Don't waste this moment." She didn't reply, but the card burned in her pocket long after he left. That night, she walked home under the clear summer sky, the warm breeze brushing her hair. For the first time, she felt afraid. Not of the Marines, not of Donovan's past, but of the crushing weight of expectation pressing down on her. She wasn't strong. She wasn't wise. She was just Maya. She opened her apartment door to find Donovan sitting at her small kitchen table, waiting with a steaming mug of tea. The Marines had helped him find temporary shelter, but tonight he'd come to talk. "You don't look good," he said bluntly. Maya collapsed into the chair opposite him. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want all these eyes on me. I just wanted to help." Her voice broke. "And now everyone wants me to be something I'm not. A leader. A symbol. I can't carry that." Donovan studied her quietly, then nodded. "I know what that weight feels like." She looked up at him. His eyes, though weathered, held a clarity that cut through the fog. "When I was in the Corps," he continued, "I wasn't the fastest, wasn't the strongest. But my men, they looked at me like I was unbreakable. And some nights, I lay awake thinking I'd fail them all. But here's the truth, Maya. It's not about being unbreakable. It's about standing when it matters, even if your knees shake." Maya's throat tightened. "But I'm not a hero. I didn't save lives." Donovan's voice softened. "You saved mine." The words hit harder than any headline. Tears blurred her vision. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. "You already did," Donovan said gently. "You showed kindness when no one else would. That's enough. Don't let the world twist it. Own it." For the first time in days, Maya felt something shift inside her, a fragile spark of steadiness. Maybe she didn't have to be perfect. Maybe all she had to do was keep being herself. Still, as she glanced out the window at the glowing city lights, she knew the storm wasn't over. If anything, it was only building. And the real test of her kindness was still to come. The storm came on Sunday. By then, the story had grown beyond the cafe, beyond the Marines, beyond the town itself. News anchors debated it. Politicians tried to claim it. Strangers on the internet turned Maya's name into hashtags and slogans. But the heart of it all was still one ordinary act: a waitress handing a sandwich to a hungry man. That morning, Main Street looked like a festival ground, though no one came for celebration. The sidewalks overflowed with people. Families holding flags, children sitting on their parents' shoulders, veterans wearing medals on jackets that have been stored away for decades. Signs bob in the crowd. One small act can change the world. Honor our heroes. Kindness first. The cafe, her cafe, had its doors closed. The little open sign flipped to close because the building could not hold the flood of visitors. But outside, it had become something else. A gathering place almost sacred, where people came not for food but for meaning. Maya stood in the upstairs window, her hands pressed against the glass, staring at the ocean of faces. She had never seen so many people in one place. Not for her. Never for her. The weight of it nearly knocked her to her knees. Her phone buzzed with calls she ignored. Journalists wanted statements. Agencies wanted contracts. Strangers wanted her presence at rallies. Everyone seemed to want a piece of her. Her breath grew shallow, panic threatening to choke her. "I'm not a leader," she whispered to the empty room. "I'm just me." A knock on the door. She turned. Donovan stepped inside quietly. He looked different now. His beard trimmed, his hair cut by a Marine barber the day before. His clothes clean, donated by one of his brothers in arms. But more than that, his eyes had changed. Where there once had been fog, now there was fire. "You can't hide forever," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not a leader," she repeated, her voice breaking. "They want me to be someone I'm not. A hero. A symbol. I didn't ask for this. I don't know what to say to them." Donovan stepped closer. "Neither did I." Her eyes met his, confused. "When I first put on the uniform, I wasn't ready to lead men into battle," he said. "I thought leaders had to be perfect, unshakable. But one day the fight came, and all I could do was stand, even though my knees were shaking. And those men followed me. Not because I was perfect, but because I showed up." He touched her shoulder, steadying her. "You showed up, Maya. That's all anyone can ask." Her chest tightened. She nodded, the fear not gone but softened. Together, they stepped outside. The crowd erupted instantly. Cheers, shouts, clapping, but quieted as Maya raised her hand, her knees trembling but her voice beginning to find strength. She stood on the cafe steps, sunlight blazing around her, and for the first time, she spoke not as a waitress, but as someone the world had chosen to hear. "I didn't do anything special," she began, her voice trembling but clear. "I didn't set out to change the world. I didn't even know his name. I saw a man who was hungry, and I gave him food. That's all." A hush spread across the crowd. Thousands of eyes locked on her. "But maybe that's the point," she continued. "Kindness doesn't have to be big to matter. It doesn't have to be expensive or loud or noticed by cameras. It's in every small choice we make, to see someone, to stop, to help, to remember they matter. Because every person matters." She glanced at Donovan beside her, who stood tall now, no longer the broken man with a cardboard sign. "This man," she said softly, "was forgotten, not by his brothers here, not by the Marines, but by the world. And yesterday, all I did was remember him. Today, you all remember him. Tomorrow, maybe we can remember everyone who feels invisible." Her voice wavered, but she kept going. "We live in a world that teaches us to hurry past pain, to close our eyes to suffering, to look away because it's easier. But we can do better. If one sandwich can bring 300 Marines to a cafe, imagine what 1,000 acts of kindness could bring to this world. Imagine what happens if we all stop looking away." The silence that followed was thick, electric. Even the air seemed to pause. And then, slowly, the applause began, gentle at first, then thunderous, rising until the street shook with it. Tears streaked faces. Strangers embraced. Veterans saluted. Children waved flags. Donovan stepped forward, his gravelly voice carrying through the roar. "I was ready to disappear," he said. "I was ready to fade out quietly, because I thought I didn't matter anymore. But she didn't let me. She remembered me when no one else would. And now all of you have remembered too. His voice broke, but he pressed on. So I'll fight again. Not with a rifle, not on a battlefield, but here, for the men and women who are still out there, sleeping under bridges holding signs, waiting for someone to see them. If one waitress can remind us of our honor, then shame on us if we ever forget it again. The roar that followed shook windows. Flags whipped in the hot summer wind. Maya covered her mouth, overwhelmed by the power of it all. The crowd surged forward, not in chaos but in unity. They placed flowers at the cafe steps, notes of thanks, photos of loved ones lost to war or to silence. A little boy approached Maya with wide eyes and said simply, "I want to be kind too." She bent down, hugged him, and whispered, "That's how it starts." That evening, when the crowd dispersed and the street grew quiet, Maya sat outside the cafe with Donovan. The sky glowed with fire, streaks of orange and purple melting into night. The steps were covered in flowers, the air still humming with the memory of voices. "You know," Donovan said, sipping coffee, "the Corps taught us that one man can't change the world. But today I'm not so sure." Maya smiled faintly. "I didn't change the world. People did. I just lit a spark." Donovan nodded. And sparks can burn bright enough to warm the coldest nights. They sat in silence, watching the last light fade. Maya realized then that life would never return to the way it was. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a reminder, a symbol of something the world had almost forgotten. That kindness is never wasted. And somewhere deep inside, she accepted it, not as a burden, but as a gift. The next morning, the cafe opened its doors again. Customers came in with smiles, with stories, with determination. Donovan was there too, greeting veterans, hugging strangers, finding purpose again. And Maya, apron tied, coffee pot in hand, knew the world had changed. Not because of her, but because kindness had proven itself contagious. Weeks later, communities across the country launched projects in Donovan's name. Shelters were built. Food drives multiplied. Schools taught the sandwich lesson to children. No act of kindness is too small. And though Maya still served sandwiches, she knew each one carried more than bread and cheese. It carried a reminder, a possibility, a spark. One evening, as she wiped down a table, Donovan looked at her and said, "Funny, all this from sandwich." Maya smiled, her eyes soft. Not just a sandwich, a beginning. And in that golden hour, with the cafe alive with laughter and hope, it felt true. Sometimes the smallest act can echo louder than war, louder than fame, louder than silence. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can echo forever.